All right, let's get into it. We're talking about one of the great, tragic stories in business history, Kodak. How does a company that was photography, a company that literally defined it for 100 years, end up killing its own future? It's a classic cautionary tale, sure, but the details, they're even more wild than you'd imagine.
So get this, the quote you're seeing, that's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. That's what a Kodak executive actually said in 1976 to the guy who had just invented the future. That one sentence, that's pretty much the sound of an empire starting to crumble.
Yep, you heard that right. The digital camera, the very thing that would eventually destroy Kodak, was invented inside Kodak by one of their own engineers, Steve Sasson. Now, to be fair, this thing was a beast. It was the size of a toaster, took about 23 seconds to capture a grainy black and white photo onto a cassette tape. It was not pretty, but it worked. It was the first glimpse of the future. So, how on earth does this happen? How do you invent the future and then just ignore it? Well, that's the thing. It was a completely self-inflicted wound. This is a story about a company that was so successful it became paralyzed. And to really get why they fell, you first have to understand the massive, massive empire they were trying to protect. And that empire, it was all built on film. For pretty much the entire 20th century, Kodak wasn't just a company, it was photography. And if you want to know why they failed, you have to understand their golden goose, their cash cow. They had this business model that was just a license to print money. It's called the razor and blades model, and Kodak were masters of it. Here's how it works. Sell the razor, the camera, for cheap. Get it into everyone's hands. Then you make a killing selling the blades, the stuff you have to buy over and over again. And for Kodak, the blades were the film, the developing chemicals, the printing paper. That's where the real money was. And we're talking astronomical profits. Just look at this number, 90%. That was Kodak's market share for film in the US, 90. That's not just market leadership, that's practically a monopoly. The company was basically addicted to the fire hose of cash that came from selling film. It was predictable, it was massive, and it was all they knew. And here's the paradox, right? That unbelievable success, it became their greatest weakness. The entire culture of the company, from the top floor all the way down, was designed to do one thing: protect the film business. Anything that threatened film was the enemy. And that mindset created this corporate inertia, a resistance to change that, well, it would end up being completely fatal. This leads us right into the heart of the problem, a classic business school case study called the Innovator's Dilemma. And for Kodak, it all came down to a fear of, eating their own lunch, cannibalization. Just look at the choice they had in front of them. On one side, you've got film, super high profit margins, a market they completely owned, a technology they'd perfected. On the other side, digital. In the early days, it had low, if any, profit margin. The market was a total unknown, and it was a disruptive technology that would directly compete with their cash cow. So, what did they do? They chose to protect the guaranteed profits of today instead of betting on the uncertain, messy future. And this led to this vicious cycle of doing, well, nothing. They invent the thing in 75. Then they get scared it'll kill their film profits. So what do? They bury it. They tell the inventor to keep it quiet, and they just focus on film. Even worse, they got distracted. In the 80s, when they should have been pouring money into R&D for digital, they wasted over $5 billion buying a drug company. $5 billion? That money could have funded their entire digital future. So while Kodak was busy protecting its past, the digital revolution just happened without them. The decline wasn't just likely, it was inevitable. The world simply wasn't going to wait. And you can see the whole disaster unfold on this timeline. It's like watching a slow-motion train wreck. They invent the camera in 75. By the 90s, competitors like Sony and Canon, who had no film business to protect, are going all in on digital. In 2001, Kodak actually buys a photo-sharing site called Ophoto, a potential lifeline. But what do they do with it? They try to use it to get people to order more prints. They just didn't get it. And then, of course, 2007. The iPhone comes out, and it's game over. That device made sharing photos instant, free, and seamless. It wasn't just a competitor. It was an extinction-level event for their whole way of doing business. I mean, look at this. Even when they finally got serious and entered the digital camera market, their market share just tanked. They had a decent start, but they were so far behind the curve. Companies that were born digital, like Canon and Sony, just ran circles around them with better and better products. And this really gets to the core of it. Kodak fundamentally misunderstood what digital was for. They thought it was a new, worse way to make prints. They were stuck in the razor and blades mindset. But the value wasn't in the print, it was in the share. It was about instant connection. While Kodak was building printing kiosks, the rest of the world was busy building Facebook. Okay, so to really hammer this home, let's look at Kodak's biggest rival, Fujifilm. Because here you have a tale of two companies, both titans of the film industry, both facing the exact same existential threat. But one survived and one didn't. Why? This table says it all, really. Look at the difference in approach. Kodak, delayed. They were scared. They were rigid. Fujifilm, they went for it. They were proactive and aggressive. But here's the key difference. Kodak saw themselves as a photography company. Fujifilm took a step back and realized they were actually a high-precision chemistry company. And that one shift in thinking changed everything. Look at how they pivoted. They took their expertise in chemistry, the stuff they learned making film, and applied it everywhere. That antioxidation technology that stopped photos from fading, well, it turns out it's also great for anti-aging cosmetics. Their knowledge of applying thin chemical layers, perfect for making films for LCD screens. They moved into healthcare, life sciences, high-tech materials. They survived by realizing their product wasn't their identity. When you get right down to it, the Kodak story is this powerful, painful reminder that sometimes your biggest competitor is your own past success. Their failure wasn't about a lack of technology. They invented the darn thing. They had the patents, the engineers, everything. What they lacked was vision. They lacked the courage to let go of a profitable past to embrace a really uncertain future. So what are the big lessons here? Well, you have to embrace disruption, even when it looks like it's going to hurt your main business. You have to know what your real core strength is, not just what you sell today. You need a culture that's not afraid to experiment. And you have to remember that a long-term vision is way more important than protecting short-term profits. It's about solving what your customer needs, not just selling them your old product in a new box. Which leaves us with this final thought, and it's a big one. Is your company's greatest success also its biggest threat? It's a question every leader, every business really has to ask themselves. Because if you don't, you might just find yourself having your very own Kodak moment.